Xi Jinping was in Vietnam for a state visit, and he received a big old middle finger, which was captured on camera and broadcasted to millions in China. Then, when he tried to toast the Vietnamese General Secretary, the most embarrassing thing happened. Let's talk about it. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. So Xi Jinping went to Vietnam on December 12th for a state visit. At the reception, a group of women held flags to welcome Xi Jinping and his wife. And in 1 second, a middle finger was seen captured here. And then, of course, this was broadcasted live in China's state media. That big old middle finger hilariously captures Xi Jinping's reality right now. Nobody likes the CCP. Of course, the original story was edited to remove the middle finger, but man, was it funny. Here, I'll show it to you one more time. Now, why has Xi Jinping come to Vietnam? Well, because this is the next competition spot in Asia between the US and China. Winning Vietnam over is a victory in the new Cold War. Vietnam, despite being communist, its market has largely opened up and more connected with the West. And recently, its top Vietnamese officials met with Biden and subsequently with Kishida from Japan. And Xi Jinping's visit clearly set the tone that Vietnam is a key nation to compete over with the United States and allies. Normally, you might think, though, oh, the communists, they must bond over their love for Karl Marx, right? Well, not quite. Vietnam's history with both the United States and China is quite complicated, as you might know. When China and Vietnam had their war in 1978 to 1979, it was the CCP who wanted to show American President Nixon a chance to improve US-China relations, almost like it's a gift. But it severely destroyed the China-Vietnam relations in the process. And I think to this day, many Vietnamese people still remember the war as one of shame and hatred towards the CCP. And back then, the Soviet Union was backing Vietnam, whereas China was in almost a deterioration with the relationship against the Soviet Union. And it was backing the Cambodia and Khmer Rouge. And so I guess you could call it a different path of communist ways. Against this backdrop, in 2023, Vietnam would once again become a key geopolitical focus for two forces in the new Cold War. I don't think Vietnam truly wants to work that close with China. Why? Well, this video might explain it. Here, Xi Jinping at the state banquet gets up to toast with the Vietnamese General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong, who, of course, for Nguyen to just sit there, do the toast, and then immediately turn the other way. While this little gesture may not seem that important, it's actually quite important. It shows a I don't F with you kind of attitude, like this.
Yeah, with nobody, like at all, nobody. So with nobody, I don't go anywhere, I don't go to parties, I barely go outside.
Okay, it's a joke, right? But Nguyen is 10 years older than Xi Jinping. But here's the problem. If Vietnam is really about to cozy up with China, it's a equal level treatment because both Xi Jinping and Nguyen are general secretaries, head of state. From a diplomatic stance, they should be on equal level. So Nguyen should still get up. Not as an elder, but as a party leader and the head of state. For Xi to bow forward and to toast to Nguyen, at least I think in Asian culture, no matter what, the host should still get up. This isn't visiting your grandpa at his home. This is a state visit. So it's clear that Xi Jinping on his side is trying to show that he's appreciating the banquet, that he wants to do more with Vietnam. But man, is it awkward if Nguyen just turns around. So not only did Grandpa Xi lose face a lot by doing the uttermost to toast, the lack of getting up is a sign that Vietnam doesn't really want to mess with China. Why would Xi spend so much effort then try to appeal to the Vietnamese regime? Before we continue, here is a sponsored segment. If you're into Asian tea or want to get into it, here's a great tea to start. This is a Taiwan High Mountain Tea. We got it directly from tea farmers in the Taiwan's Ali Mountain. It's a limited in quantity harvest. The reason I love this tea is because of the sweetness that comes from the first few brew. Normally, a green tea has a rather bitter taste, and this one, from a slightly cooled boiling water, will give you a nice and smooth tasting experience. And in my experience, many Taiwan High Mountain Tea actually uses a blend of Vietnamese tea leaves and Taiwan tea leaves. But this one is 100% high altitude harvest from Taiwan. So get yours today, link in the description, and use my code DAVID for a 15% discount. Free shipping in the US on purchases $70 or more. Well, it's because of three reasons. The first is the South China Sea. And Xi Jinping needs to secure Vietnam specifically because it's the end anchor to the first island chain. Now, this is a series of countries that keeps China's military expansion at bay. If the US can secure every country's defense commitment in the first island chain, that's South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Vietnam, then it's able to contain and trap China's military within the first island chain. Right now, other than Vietnam, all of the first island chain nations are siding with the United States. China has offended the Philippines greatly. And so here I think we have to talk a bit about the history of this area. The trigger, of course, for the American involvement in the Vietnam War is an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin. and that sits between China's Hainan Island and northern Vietnam. So the outcome of the incident was the passage by U.S. Congress of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which of course granted President Lyndon B. Johnson the authority to help any southeastern country who feels like that their government is threatened by the communist aggression. So the resolution, of course, allows the direct military involvement into South Vietnam to fight against the North. But if you consider that context, this latest joint statement from Vietnam and China mentions the Gulf of Tonkin 4 times. Now, considering this sounds like it doesn't have anything to do with the United States, it actually does. Because the real interest isn't just the Gulf of Tonkin, it's the entire half of the South China Sea that's closer to Vietnam, which of course includes the Gulf of Tonkin. So the CCP wants that part to be freely navigated by the Chinese naval forces. By extension, it would also mean that if Vietnam agrees, it would open up its end of the anchor chain to allow the CCP to not be fully trapped by the First Island chain. Now, of course, we understand that the CCP has this illegal claim in the area called the 9-dash line or the 10-dash line now, but it needs to still secure these legal agreements with the countries involved. And if you really divide the South China Sea by half, the right half is the Philippines, the left half is Vietnam. Recently, of course, it has stepped up the aggression in the South China Sea, particularly on the side of the Philippines. The relationship between China and the Philippines has deteriorated dramatically. And China has repeatedly harassed supply missions from the Philippines to its outpost in the Second Thomas Shoal and increased illegal occupation around that area. And so amid all this, right, he's focusing more on the Vietnamese side. Now, there is still island disputes happening all over the South China Sea, particularly with the Vietnam islands, but the CCP is trying really hard to minimize that from getting in the way because it knows that if it pushes Vietnam away, it's game over. Now, we could argue that the Vietnamese side also has things that they need to worry about, like, well, is China's going to invade? Will they also bring Vietnam into the war, maybe over something like Taiwan? Well, I think the chance of that is very small, but China needs to secure a guarantee or a partnership with Vietnam in the area because this war isn't just limited to the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea. It's a global conflict if it does happen. And so they're placing a lot of the bet on Vietnam. And if, of course, again, Vietnam goes to the West and stops being friendly with China, that puts the entire pressure of the CCP's operation in the area basically to just be contained. The second is the economy. Right now, the Vietnamese regime is a four-part governing body. So there's the government, the state council, the legislative, and the party. Now, unlike China, which is currently ruled by one man, despite there's a leadership power still remaining in the hands of the Vietnamese Communist Party, there is distribution, particularly when it comes to the economy. So despite being communist, they're sort of in the earlier stage of the reform and opening up that happened in China. And the centralization of power isn't so great. So it's balancing itself between the US and China because there's more manufacturing and job opportunities moving to Vietnam and no longer has that much baggage attachment to China anymore. And of course, this is all because things are leaving China. So in the eyes of Vietnam, the CCP is the one that's begging Hanoi for more access. There's the geopolitical aspect, but there's also the trade aspect because you need money to secure the relationship. And one of the aspects is that there's restrictions and sanctions on Chinese products. And so if China wants to move factories out to Vietnam, then what they can do is use that to bypass said sanctions because now things are considered made in Vietnam. And Vietnamese economy is in a position to not be at the behest of the CCP because it simply doesn't need China's market. Unlike the West, who needs to export certain high technology components to China to sell, Vietnam isn't in a position to do that. So they're rather more like a competing market to China. So the only thing that's holding Vietnam to China is money. And if the CCP investments are withdrawn, then you have other countries who can help, like Japan, Australia, and the United States. They'll come in with the investments, and that can buy influence. So there isn't a lot of strings attached to the China-Vietnamese relationship, at least not from the Vietnamese side. Now, the recent upgrade of the relationship with the United States and Japan, both are now considered a comprehensive strategic partnership, which is the same level as the one with China. It shows that Vietnam isn't using the ideological aspect as its primary driver on the international stage. Like I said, they're not showing the common love for Karl Marx. It's like a thriving economy, much like India. It's leading the ASEAN nations in the Southeast Asia area. So this respect is not only a reason for Vietnam to be more independent, but it's also an idea that it can balance its national interest on aligning more with the free market economies, should the interest be there to do that, but it doesn't have any obligations to be with China. So given this assessment, we can assume that Vietnam needs more concrete and more attractive incentives from China if they want to go really be closer. Because, I mean, the global trend right now is to de-risk or decouple from China. And I simply didn't see this in the meeting between Xi Jinping and Nguyen, where they signed, of course, a bunch of deals, but it doesn't seem like it's too concrete. This socialist idea that they're trying to sign on with Vietnam, everybody knows that stuff is failing, right? That's the only thing that China can offer right now, given its domestic situation. And this isn't 10 years ago, right, where China has so much economic grasp on different countries. Now certain countries can actually choose. So the term, of course, I just mentioned, decoupling, it was a pipe dream a few years ago, but today you can see that everywhere you go. There are now alternatives to China. Sure, it's still in the infant stages, but that's moving quite fast. So countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, Korea, they no longer have to be bound to the CCP's economy incentives so that they can actually attach more of their geopolitical directions to different values, like with the free world. And this actually gives Vietnam a lot of flexibility to choose. And the third reason I think is very important as well is that Vietnam has a lot of rare earth minerals. In fact, it's the largest or the second largest after China. So in October, they restarted mining the rare earth here. And as we know, in this new technology age, rare earth is perhaps the new oil. It's the power base for semiconductors, electrical cars, phones, and much more. So if Vietnam is able to compete with China on rare earth exports, there's no reason why countries that was once gatekept by China on rare earth have to go back to China for it. They can just go to Vietnam, which of course has much a better working relationship with the West. So to summarize, Vietnam doesn't really have an interest to bow down to China anymore. They're the alternative to China, and much like India. So given the geostrategic aspect as well in the South China Sea, there's really no reason why I see that Vietnam needs to be with China much closer than it is with the United States. In fact, I think it's moving closer to the US than that of China. All right, that's it today for the episode on Vietnam. If you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, I'm David Zhang, this is China Insider. Bye-bye.